Welcome to Outlook Money's interview series, Wealth Wizards, where you'll find money maestros in conversation with me, Nidhi Sinha, editor, Outlook Money. In this series, I help you meet experts you've always wanted to listen to and try to bring forth nuggets, not just from their work, but also their lives. Our guest today is Dan Ariely, Professor of Psychology and Behavioural Economics and a founding member of the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University, North Carolina, United States. His work is focused on the irrational ways we all behave, but his initial inspiration came from his own experience when he met with an accident at a very early age. So let's start the conversation to find out more about him and how irrational behavior can affect our investing decisions. Welcome to Wealth Wizards, Mr. Dan Ariely, and we are so glad that you took out your time to join us today.
Pleasure.
Could you start with telling a bit about yourself?
My name is Dan Ariely. I'm a professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University, and I work in an area called behavioral economics. And this area is looking at people not from a rational perspective, but from an irrational perspective. We're basically asking the question of what are we doing that is not in our long-term best interest. But maybe to say something about myself, especially if people are seeing us on video, I look a little strange. This half a beard look is odd. Maybe I'll say a few things about my half a beard because it's a little bit about my history, a little bit about social science. So the first reason for this half a beard is that many years ago I was badly burned. I was burned in about 70% of my body. I spent about 3 years in hospital, and the right side of my face is all scars, so the hair doesn't grow on this side. But of course I could shave, and if I shave I look less strange.
But you look nice actually.
Thank you. But for many years I shaved, and then a few years ago I went on a month-long hike, and during that month-long hike I didn't shave. And the month-long hike ended, I looked in the mirror and I didn't like my look. It's a very strange look. And I thought I'll shave it, but I thought I'll shave it in a few weeks. I thought I'll keep this half a beard for a few weeks just to remind myself about the hike. But I posted a few things on social media and so on, and to my surprise I got some messages from people who thanked me for my half a beard. Why did they thank me for the half a beard? These were people who were struggling with their own injuries. They were feeling that they were hiding something, and they felt that I was kind of so out there with my injury, it gave them a little strength. So, for example, there was a woman in her 50s that told me that she had a car accident when she was 17, and she hasn't worn a skirt since she was 17. And she said she's going to try now.
I see.
But the real interesting things for me happened about 4 months down the line. I felt that my relationship with my scars and injury has changed. And I thought, why now? I've been injured for many years. What happened? Now, think about the process of shaving for somebody like me. I start the day with no hair on this side and little black dots on the left side. And the act of shaving, or the act of half shaving, for me, was also an act of hiding. I was more non-symmetrical before shaving, and I was less non-symmetrical after shaving. And actually, stopping shaving was incredibly helpful. It was incredibly helpful for self-acceptance. And the last thing I would say about this is about social science. So here I am, a social scientist, and I did not predict that stopping shaving would help self-acceptance. If you ask me how would it feel like to not shave, I could predict day number 1. I could say people would ask questions, kids would laugh, people would point. But if you ask me what would be the effect 4 months down the road and how would it change your self-acceptance, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. And I think that's actually what social science is supposed to do. It's supposed to take areas where we don't have good intuitions about them and basically give us some hints for things we should try. and things we could do better, like having half a beard. I'm not recommending exactly half a beard, but I'm saying let's admit that there's lots of areas in life when we don't have good intuitions, and let's just explore ways to study those areas and understand what we should do.
Absolutely. So that's a story of inspiration, of course. And among other things that are, you have a signature half beard, I would say. But the other thing I couldn't help but noticing when we were exchanging emails while fixing this interview was your email signature called Irrationally Yours. And that was quite intriguing. So do you think irrationality is so inherent that people can't rid themselves of it? You have been in this area for so long and still you sign Irrationally Yours.
Yeah. So first of all, yes. So maybe two answers. The first answer is that I think about the human mind as a Swiss Army knife. If you were going to do a task, there's not a single task that you would say, for this I need a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife is never the best tool. It's a little knife, it's a little can opener, it's a little tweezer, it's a little scissors. It's not great, but in a compact way it does lots of things. And our mind is like that. We're not perfect in anything, but we are quite good in lots of things. But our Swiss Army knife was not designed for this task of modern life. It was designed to task from a long time ago in our evolutionary history. So we don't have a tool to deal with cryptocurrency, and we don't have a tool to deal with investments, and we don't have a tool to understand compound interest and so on. So we have, it was always a Swiss Army knife, but it's an ancient Swiss Army knife, not suited for the task today. But the other thing I want to say is, we usually think of irrationality as bad, but not all irrationality is bad. And it's important to remember that. So love is irrational. Do we want to eradicate it? Of course not. Many times our motivation at work are irrational. So there's lots of things that are irrational, but wonderful. We help other people, we fall in love, we care. Our human nature is not a rational nature. And yes, there are some downfalls to it, but there are some wonderful parts to it as well.
Absolutely, very well said. Coming back to the investing, the area of investing that we are talking about today. I saw your latest book, which came last year, Misbelief, What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. So could you help our viewers understand how misbelief can come into the way of their investing decisions and even irrationality?
So maybe let me say a couple of things about misbelief in the beginning. This book is about the process of getting any of us to start believing in strange things. I'm guessing that all of us have somebody in our circle that 5 years ago we would look at them and say, me and this other person are looking at life in the same way. And now we're looking at them and say, I don't understand what this person is thinking. I don't understand how they're interpreting the world. And of course, COVID was a big event, but it's true for other things as well, right? It's true for polarization across lots of things from society. And in that mechanism, I identify 4 big elements that attack our personality and gets us to believe different things. I talk about stress, which is the building block, cognition, the way we process information, personality, the way our individual differences play out, and then the social element. And I mostly look at it in the context of, like, I tell stories about COVID because I was so attacked during COVID, but it's mostly in the context of social beliefs. Do we believe that the government is in our favor or not? Do we believe that in modern medicine or not, and so on. And the overall envelope for that book is that as a society we're losing trust. That part of the problem of misbelief is that it gets us to trust less, and when we trust less, society loses. We have lots of challenges, and as society has less trust, our ability to act in our long-term best interest is lower. So now we talk about, let's move to investing. So first of all, when we talk about trust, I think investing inherently requires trust. If you ask whether people are willing to put their money in a bank, whether people are willing to open a brokerage account, whether people are willing to invest in stocks, or whether people just keep cash under the mattress, buy gold or cryptocurrency, one of the big issues is trust. And I think that as trust gets lower, people are less willing to do it. Now, I don't know enough about the Indian context, but I was recently in another country in South America, where the government there is trying very hard to get people to save, and very unsuccessful. And one of the blessings of modern life is that we live much longer, but it's also a curse.
Right.
If we all worked until 65 and died at 66, we would not need to save that much money for retirement. But if we work until 65 and then we live another 20 years, that's a very, very substantial amount of time. That means that for every year that we work, we need to save for about half a year at retirement. That's just an amazing amount. It's very, very hard to achieve without starting early and saving in a way that gets us compound interest. So in that country, trust ends up being a huge barrier. And the government is offering all kinds of wonderful paths for savings, but people are not taking them. So that's one big issue. And then there are other issues. What information do we process? How do we act? What is the role of our emotions? So we can go more into this, but I'll just give you one example. One of the big brokers in the US published a little story about who are the most successful investors. Who do you think they were? What do you think?
People who were wise about it.
That you would hope that that's the answer. What they found is that the people who died were the best investors. Now, why were dead people the best investors? Because they didn't make any changes to their portfolio. And it turns out that when we invest, we have some very, very bad strategies. We buy things that are expensive, we sell things that are cheap, and we are our own worst enemies. The fidelity claim was that buy and hold. Now you need to rebalance. There's some nuances to that, but this idea that we would outsmart the market. I know when to buy, I know when to sell, we can time the market. The more people engage in that on average, we end up just losing money. So the stock market is a good example of a place where often our emotions, once we have trust and we're willing to invest, now it's often that our emotions get the best of us and lead us astray, both when stock goes up and when the stock goes down.
Right. You were talking about trust, so I just wanted to ask another question in the Indian context, but I'll give you that context. Is that cryptocurrency is something, you've been mentioning that, is something that people don't inherently trust. At least the regulators in India and a lot of experts are really wary of that investment right now. But during the year 2021, when crypto was really in a rally, people went crazy about crypto. Young people who didn't have enough money So how does the trust factor kind of play here, and what was driving them at that time?
So first of all, crypto has the benefits that it's a trustless system. The system has sufficient things that you can trust it, but you don't need to trust anybody. And that's actually the reason I don't like it. I think that we are in a crisis of trust, but I want to fix trust. I don't want to bypass it. And I think in terms of the economic system, I think that it's one of the places to practice trust. Look, I wrote a check and the same amount cleared. I used my credit card, it worked. We have a lot of opportunity in the economic system to practice trust and to see that trust is actually worthwhile, that it's working. When we go to our doctors, much less clear. When we buy food, it's much less clear. The economic system, I think, is like the training wheel for trust. So I think that if we used blockchain and cryptocurrency for everything, and we would not practice trust, I think we would be worse off. But in terms of people doing it, there's certainly a big notion of gambling. Right. And as people, we are susceptible to gambling. So B.F. Skinner, the famous psychologist, showed what he called random reinforcement. What's random reinforcement? Imagine a rat presses on a lever to get food. If every 100 times the rat presses, they get food, that's exciting. But if it's a random number, between 1 and 200, the rat is more excited. The rat keeps on pressing for longer, even when the reward stops. And if you think about this metaphor of random reinforcement, it's of course how gambling works. You go to Las Vegas, you put some dollars in, you press the machine, it's a random process. Mostly we lose, but from time to time it's exciting. Social media and email are the same thing. Most of our email is not that interesting. Most of the things in social media are not that interesting, but from time to time it's exciting, and that keeps us going. Imagine that every 200 emails was a useful email. You would stop reading. But if you don't know which one it is, every time your phone vibrates, you say, oh, maybe this is the one that is worthwhile listening. And crypto has huge variance, reward and punishment. And because of that, it's very easy to get addicted. Very easy to get addicted. Myself, at some point, I was very curious about crypto. This was 2007. I was very interested in crypto, and I decided to buy some cryptocurrency just to become more interested. And I thought, okay, if I'll own a few things, I'll read more on it. It was true, but it's so tempting to check all the time. It's just like, it went out. It's very emotional roller coaster. So I think I don't like it for the trust, and I don't like it for the randomization. I don't like it because it takes too much attention and time from people. Eventually I sold it, by the way, because I felt I learned enough, and I felt it was just influencing my mood too much. I was checking it too often, a few times a day. I was too happy when it went up. I was too sad when it went down. I thought, okay, it's just not a good way to spend my time. So I don't like the trustless system, and I don't like the gambling approach. Now, it is true that, if you look historically at Bitcoin, it has been doing very well, right? People who've held it for a while have done very well financially.
In fact, I was going to ask you, what do you think about, had you kept your cryptocurrency then, because that was 2006, 8 you said, it would have given you perhaps huge returns right now.
Huge returns, no question. And from time to time I remember that.
So is there a regret too?
Of course. I mean, it's impossible to say I should have thought about it differently, but I don't think too much about that. But yes, but from time to time, I now own a tiny bit of multiple cryptocurrency just to understand what it is. When the NFT started, I bought one to experiment with it, but I no longer think of it as an investment. I think of it as tiny amounts of money that I'm just using to keep my interest in this bizarre, interesting world alive. But will it continue to go up? And I wouldn't risk, personally, I would keep a tiny amount of money in crypto as an interesting topic, but I wouldn't keep any real stake in my future in it. I think it's just gambling. And we as people, the moment something is moving up for a few periods, we think it will continue to go up. We think, oh, this is the world is that crypto is just going up. I don't think so, not necessarily. But our human nature is to think, oh, housing prices have been going up, it will continue to go up. Crypto has been going up, it will continue to go up. I'm not sure that's the case.
Right, that's a big learning for the Indian audience who really, I think, went crazy about crypto at one point, and I think it still continues to a large extent. But we were talking about irrationality, and like you said, people are irrational in their decisions. So when it comes to markets, we've also been talking about that how rationality can really help you with your investments and making the right choices. So how do the two marry, this irrationality in the intrinsic irrationality in a person's personality and the rational decisions that this person needs to make to perhaps succeed in the stock market, if I can use that word?
Yeah. So in an overly simplistic way, we have two types of decisions that we make. One is about spending now versus spending later, and one is from the money that we spend now, what do we want to spend it? Very generally, that's it. I mean, spending later is also called savings, but it's really for spending later. And the reality is, for most people, saving is what we have after we finish spending. But that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to start by thinking, how do we decide what to spend now and what to spend later? What's the right amount? If we basically say, okay, we'll save whatever we don't spend, we'll end up spending too much and not saving enough. And then the sad thing is, when we get to age 65, we wake up and we said, oh, we made a mistake. I think the Indian culture still has a huge benefit, is that I think kids still respect their parents and they would help.
Only in pockets, I would say.
Maybe it's going down like the rest of the world, but if your retirement strategy is for your kids to take care of you, start working on this. But I think that the first thing we don't do well is that we overspend and we undersave. That's the first thing, and it's easy to see why it happens, because we see ads all around us, and we see our neighbors spending, and we see people on social media enjoying all kinds of things, right? Nobody on social media is talking about their credit card debt or their lack of savings for the future, right? So we have a world of abundance. At least looks like a world of abundance we feel we want as well. Every time we look at them, say, I want that too, I want that too. But at the end of the day, it's not in our favor. So the first thing we need to do is to curb our irrational need, because the now is very clear, the later is very abstract. And let me give you an example. So imagine I said, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate right now, or a full box of chocolate in a week? half a box of chocolate now or full in a week? And I would show you the chocolate, and I would open the box, and you can smell it. Most people say, give me the half a box of chocolate right now. It's not worthwhile to wait another week for another half a box of chocolate. What if we push the choice into the future? And we say, what would you rather have? Half a box of chocolate in a year or a full box of chocolate in a year and a week? Most people say, of course I can wait a week for another half a box of chocolate. Who wouldn't wait? Now, of course, in a year from now, you could be in a situation, you could have it right now, you have to wait another week. Those two problems are equivalent. The difference is that the first one has emotions. When we have chocolate now is emotional, chocolate in a week is not. Half a box of chocolate in a year is not emotional. So what happened is that life is very tempting. Actually, our modern capitalistic society is a society of temptation. Every app wants you to spend your time and attention and money. Every store wants you to buy something now. We are walking in a world in which everybody wants something from us. Who is helping us to think about our long-term future? Maybe a spouse, maybe parents, maybe religion, maybe the government, but very little. Most of the entities around us, or our phones, in our TV, around us on the street, want something from us now. They want our time, money, and attention right now. And because of that, the first big failure is to do too many things that are good for us now, and we are sacrificing the future. So what can we do about it? The first thing is, of course, to realize it. The second is to create a rule for ourselves. Rules are very helpful, because let's say you want to go on a diet. Diets are very tough because it's always one more forkful. Like, when do you stop? But if you create rules for diets, like you say, I'm not going to drink soft drinks anymore. That's much easier, right? Like we say, do and don't do. Much easier. By the way, that's how religions generally work, right? They give you rules, do and don't do. They don't say, try to limit your meat consumption. They say, don't do it. So the first thing to do is to recognize that we need much more money for retirement than we probably imagine that we do. And then we need to create a rule. Say, I want to save 20%, I want to save 25%, I want 18%. We have to decide what's our rule. By the way, it's okay to say, look, I want to save 20%, but it will take me 3 years to get there. I'm going to start with 10, and every year I'll increase it by 3%. We don't have to solve it all right now. It's a long-term game, and we have to think about it in the long term. And then one of the nice things about money is that money can be done things automatically. So we can do automatic transfers and automatic deductions, and we can move money from one account to another and from one bank to another, and there's all kinds of things we could do for us that are very, very good. So that's the next thing. The next thing we need to do. And then, of course, we need to figure out what is exactly our saving strategy, our investment strategy. But it needs to come, many times when we think about investing, we just think about, okay, so what's our risk tolerance and how do we do our portfolio? But the reality is that the first question is, how much money do we put there in general? Is the first question. There's another problem with money, which is that we are motivated by concrete things, and money is abstract. So, money is a wonderful invention, right? It's kind of like the wheel in terms of what it has done to humanity. If we lived in a barter society where you would grow olives and I would grow broccoli, and we would come and do an exchange, things would take forever, and a lot of things we couldn't do in society. We couldn't have teachers. We couldn't have engineers. Like, all the things that require long-term projects and planning and so on could not work. So money is amazing. It's amazing to think about money. But one of the nice things about money, which is the defining feature of money, is we can do lots of things with it, almost everything. That's also its Achilles heel. That's also the problem with money. And why is it a problem with money? It's because we can do so many different things with money, we also don't think specifically about what money is. And here's an example. So we did this study in a Toyota dealership. And we asked people, we say, hey, if you're going to buy this car, what would you not be able to do? Right? Opportunity cost of money. You do one thing with money, you can't do something else. We asked, hey, if you buy this car today, what would you not be able to do? And people had no answer. Why? Because they never thought about it before. So we said, okay, something has to give. If you buy this new car, what will have to give? The most common answer people gave us was, if I buy this Toyota, I can't buy a Honda. Which of course is true, but that's not the issue. The issue was to say, if I buy this car, I will not be able to go on vacation for the next 4 years, and I will not be able to buy 75 books and 17 cups of coffee, and some kind of intertemporal across product category. But the reality, it's very hard to think about. Think about for you. When was the last time you went to buy something and you thought, oh, if I'm buying this, I can't buy something else? Every time we spend money, we buy a cup of coffee, it comes at the cost of something. But the cost of what? Very hard to figure out. Now, if we live in a constrained world, imagine that I gave you money every morning. Let's just say that every morning I would give you 1,000 rupees. No, not enough. What's the exchange rate now? Okay, so let me give you 2,000 rupees a day. Okay, so let's say in the morning I give you 10,000. Will be nice. Okay, every morning we wake up, I give you 10,000 rupees. And I said, that's your budget for today. You would understand trade-offs. You would understand that if you taking a taxi in the morning, you might not have money for lunch, and you would understand the trade-offs. What if instead of 10,000 rupees every day, what if I gave you money for the whole week in advance? Right? I say, here's 70,000 rupees. Well, on Monday, you would feel that you have endless money. By Thursday, you would realize you're too short. What if I gave you the money for a whole month in advance? What if I added a credit card and car payment and a student loan and a mortgage and a retirement account? Now, I'm making the consequences of money very fuzzy. If I ask you in the world in which I give you 10,000 rupees every day, you understand the cost and benefits. But in a world in which you get the money for a month, plus student loans, car payment, mortgage, retirement saving, credit card, and so on, now you say, if I buy a new phone today, where's the money coming from? I have no idea. So, we should all be very grateful for a lot of the economic inventions. We should be grateful for credit cards and student loans and mortgages and so on. But we also need to understand that they make the task of thinking about money very complex and non-human. It's non-human to think that we could actually think about money in the right way. And when we can't think about money the right way, we think about it the wrong way, or sometimes we don't think about it and we just follow our instincts and we don't do the right thing. So going back to our previous point, I think that once a year we should sit. Once a year we should think about what percentage of our income we could save, and then we should try and do it in an automated way.
Right. So money is something that we keep talking about at Outlook Money, and where to save and all of that. So that was very interestingly put, the examples that you put forth. But coming back to your work, Misbelief was one book. One book was about misbelief. But I've seen in your work that you've dealt with other kind of themes that, as I see it, like dishonesty, motivation, resilience. So could you tell us a bit about that? In fact, lately I've been watching your videos and bureaucracy comes across time and again. So
Yes.
that is quite intriguing.
Yeah, I have a recent annoyance with bureaucracy, and I'm sharing it with people. I hope you forgive me for that. But maybe the thing I'll tell you about is our recent work on human motivation. So I've been studying human motivation for a long time, maybe 20 years. And I started with research in the lab, where I would measure motivation and try to change it and so on. Then I had a chapter in which I would go to one company at a time, and I would change something in their motivation, and we would look at productivity and so on. And that was a wonderful way to start with field studies. But in the last 8 years, I've been looking at how companies treat their employees, how employees feel about the company, and what does it mean for the return in the stock market for that company. And I started looking at the Fortune 500, right, the biggest 500 companies in the US, and then I now look at the Fortune 1000, a bit more. And I'm basically asking, what are the things that companies do that actually increase motivation in a way that translates into productivity? Right, so I think about companies as a machine. It's a strange machine. It has all kinds of things. Some things work better and worse. And I think as human motivation is the fuel and the lubricant. If you have an organization where people are not excited and happy and motivated, they're going to produce less. And if you have a company that people are more excited and happy and motivated, they're going to produce more. It's kind of obvious. So we have been looking at data that ask the question of what does it mean to be more motivated? So I'll ask you, do you think that companies that pay better fare better in the stock market? The stock market has the alpha, the return is higher. What do you think?
Not necessarily.
That's right, no. What about health benefits? What do you think?
Again, I would say the same.
Yeah.
There are other factors that are, considered when it comes to stock market returns or alpha, rather than how a company takes care of their employees.
So of course there are other factors as well, but it turns out that taking care of the employees is very important. But the things that are important are not what people think. So it turns out salary doesn't matter so much, health benefits don't matter so much, retirement benefits don't matter so much. Feeling appreciated matters a great deal. No, because when you work for somewhere and you don't feel appreciated, what's your motivation? Psychological safety ends up mattering a great deal. Do you feel like in this company you can say your mind? Your connection with your direct manager matters. Alignment with the company. By the way, bureaucracy hurts a lot because when companies add bureaucracy, they basically tell the employee, we don't trust you, we don't care about your time, and we don't want you to innovate. Those are the messages.
Okay.
And what we find is that those things are actually very good predictors of stock market return. But when we think about it, we have this big distinction between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation are salary and bonuses and days off, and all of those things come from the outside. Intrinsic motivation is the thing that is burning within a person. And it turns out that that's much more important. And by the way, the more we move to a knowledge economy, the more intrinsic motivation matters. Because if somebody, let's say, has to plow a field, you look at the field and say, how well was it plowed? When somebody sits in front of a computer, we don't know what's going between their ears. They can sit in front of the computers for 12 hours a day and do, and daydream, or they can really focus. And the intrinsic motivation is about how much of their own effort, on their own volitions, people want to direct to work. We also find that human capital, we call it, but human capital, human motivation is increasingly important as people do more work from home. Because, when you're in the office, there are things in the office that helps us focus. Right? When we are home, it's us in the refrigerator. There's more temptation and so on. And lots of people have admitted to me that when they work at home, sometimes they pretend the internet is not doing very well. They turn off the video. They do all kinds of funny things like that. So intrinsic motivation ends up being very, very important. And I think that companies don't put enough effort on human resource. When you look at most companies, human resource kind of at the bottom of the organization. I think human resource should be at the top. Like, they are the keepers of human motivation. They should be really important, but they end up being a legal function and not an R&D function. They're not given budgets to try and improve motivation. They're just, asked to, do the compliance module or something like that.
So in your recent blog, you've also spoken about mistakes, if I can say it's another theme. So could you talk a bit about that, on how people react to their mistakes? Because inevitably, people do make mistakes, say, in the stock markets or in general life.
Yeah, I think, the stock market is a great metaphor for how we should think about mistakes. Every investor would tell you it's about diversification. Right? Diversification is like the first thing you want to do. You say, I'm not smart enough to understand exactly which stocks will go up and which exactly will go down. I'm slightly smart, but not very smart. And because of that, I need to diversify. If I was very, very smart, I would pick one stock, the best stock in the market, and that would be it. I'm not that smart. So I'm going to gamble on 100 stocks, and I'll gamble that the 100 stocks I picked are going to be better than the 100 stocks I didn't pick, or some other this. But I'm not able to pick the one. And of course, venture capitalists do the same thing with startups, and investors do the same thing with this. If you take the introductory course to finance, the first rule of finance is, don't think you're smarter than the market or much smarter than the market. Think that at most you're slightly smarter than the market, and diversify. That's like the first thing to do. And diversification basically means that we'll make mistakes. And I think we understand it very well in the stock market. I think we also understand it in driving. In driving, we're kind of accepted the fact that from time to time people would have accidents, and from time to time people would get killed and kill other people. We don't think now we're trying very hard to reduce mistakes. There are lots of rules for driving. Cars get better all the time. We have seat belts and anti-lock brakes, and we have rear view mirrors, and we have all kinds of things to try and reduce the accidents. But we understand that it's not an accident-free environment. But then when we come to the workplace, I think people have a different attitude to mistakes, and I think they have an unhealthy attitude to mistakes. So, for example, I talked to the head of a legal organization. This was a big IT organization. They have over 200 lawyers, and the lawyer that I talked to was the head of that organization. And he has 200 lawyers all making deals with different companies and different governments, big deals. And he says each of those lawyers is thinking about their deal as if it's the only deal in the world. And they're so afraid to make a mistake that they take zero risk. And they say, him looking at 200 lawyers, he wants them to take risks. But each of them separately, what they're afraid of is that somebody will say, this was a mistake and you did this mistake. So what do? They take way too long to write the contract. They sometimes give up opportunities. Like imagine that you have 200 lawyers working for you. You would say, you know what? I'm willing for 10% of them to make crazy deals that might work out risk return. 10% might open a new market for us in a new country or might fail. And I want 10% to be risky or 20% to be risky. But if every lawyer is just looking at their mistake and every lawyer is being afraid that somebody would come to them and say, oh, Nidhi, why did you sign that contract? In retrospect, it was a mistake. So because of that, he says the whole organization is under not taking way too long of a time. Because again, one lawyer looks at one deal, says, I don't want anybody to blame me. If it takes 3 years to finalize that, nobody would be upset with me. There's no time, there's no cost for time, there's just cost for making a mistake. So I think we live in a society where people are overly afraid of mistakes. And I think we need kind of the wisdom from the markets, which is to basically say, let's admit that we don't know that much. Let's admit that we need to gamble more. Let's try more things and let's develop a better attitude toward mistakes. The other thing is, and this is connecting back to misbelief, it's about what is the attribution for mistakes. You know, I think that, like when I talk to the misbelievers, every time they see a mistake, they think that was a bad intention. I think mistakes are mistakes. I think that, yeah, sometimes they're bad intention, but I think in most cases it's stupidity, lack of caring for details, or faulty thinking, irrationality, and so on. But if every time you see a mistake, you think it's intentional, rather than interpreting it as a mistake, that of course is a very different interpretation. So that's why, you know, I would have loved our politicians, for example, to admit mistakes. You know, I think politicians are role models. We're better than, you know, to talk about India as politicians being a role model for the world as a whole, right? So what is the politician as a role model now? Somebody told me that the word neta is politician, right?
Yeah.
And somebody told me it used to be a positive word, and now it's not a positive word anymore. You know, I think that we need role models for mistakes, and I think where everybody is now afraid to admit mistakes, that just propagates through society. So I think people are looking at the downside rather than the upside. I think we have difficulty in admitting mistakes. I think everybody just try to run from mistakes, and we don't have this portfolio approach.
So basically, don't run from your mistakes is what I'm taking out from this.
I think we should do it as a society. You know, it's a hard advice for individuals to follow when society is not doing it. I think as society we should start understanding that we are human beings, we're faulty, we make mistakes. Mistakes are opportunities to find out what didn't go right and fix it. And we shouldn't run from them, we should adopt them.
And especially the role models.
You know, think about something like near miss. Imagine you made a mistake, but it didn't end up hurting you. It's still a mistake. Now, let's say somebody texted while driving and they almost had an accident, but they didn't have an accident. Just because they almost had an accident, we shouldn't say, "Oh, I did the right thing." You know, mistakes are really about what we have done not what the world is doing with this. And maybe with this we'll end. One of the parts of my philosophy of life is karma, and I know that there's many interpretations for karma, but for me, karma is the law of cause and effect, and it basically says that we are responsible to produce good things in the world. Will the world always take it and make something good with it? No. But our responsibility is to produce good work ourselves. In the stock market, it means our responsibility is to put money in saving, in investing. Would it always go up? No. Our responsibility is to do the right thing. And I think it's very important to say there's the things that I do that are under my control, and that's I want to make sure that I'm doing my part. And then there's what the world is doing with it. And the world is sometimes going to go up and sometimes going to go down. Sometimes it's going to take something good with it and turn it into something bad, sometimes the opposite. But we need to figure out about what are the things that we control. And in the domain we've been talking about, we control what we spend money on, we can control how much we put in savings, we can control how much we get better at this over time, we can control that we don't spend money on things that don't give us enough happiness and so on. But I would say figure out the things you can control and try to get better at that. Don't wait for the world to do its thing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ariely. This conversation was very, very useful for our viewers and readers. They have a lot of nuggets to take out, and your candid way of talking will surely catch their attention. Thanks a lot for joining us for this show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.